Good afternoon, grade 12. All right, in yesterday's lesson, you would have ended it by watching the introduction and example of synthetic division. So what we're going to do with today's half-an-hour lesson is just go through an example with synthetic division just to make sure that you understand exactly how it works. So synthetic division is just one way that we can factorize cubic polynomials. Others exist, and you will get introduced to them on Monday. I personally prefer synthetic division. I find that it's quicker, I find that it's easier, and I find that I make the least mistakes with it. So your textbook actually does use two other methods, and if you're interested in those, you're welcome to read up on them in the textbook, and then we can discuss them perhaps after school, and we can just chat about them if you're really interested in those above synthetic division. But since I find this is the easiest, this is the one that I will teach you guys quite intensely, and if you don't understand it, then we have options, but here we go. All right, so we're starting off with factorizing this equation, 2x cubed minus 2x squared minus 10x minus 6. And we can see that we have our standard form of really the x cubed, then the x squared, then the x, and then no x, so the constant. All right, so according to step 1 on the video, we need to find an x so that f of x is equal to 0. And just like I said in the video yesterday, we're going to start with x equals 1. So here, wherever we see an x, we're going to replace it with a 1. Please just excuse any lags with the pen. Sometimes technology is not on my side. All right, so we've got 1 cubed, and then we've got a minus 2, 1 squared, minus 10 times 1, minus 6. And if we simplify this, we're going to get 2 minus 2 minus 10 minus 6, which is equal to minus 16, which unfortunately is not 0. So that's not our answer quite yet. So let's have a look at the next in line. Well, I like to go to -1 next, as I mentioned in the video. Now, especially with negative numbers, this is where it's extremely important that you're using your brackets. All right, so 2 and then in brackets -1 cubed minus 2 and then -1 squared minus 10 times -1 minus 6. Now, -1 cubed, we're going to get -1. Now, that's important for you to remember. -1 all cubed, -1. -1 times 2 will give us -2. -1 squared is just a +1. +1 times -2, -2, and then plus 10 minus 6. And if you calculate that, you get 0, which is a good sign. Now we know the following. I'm just going to put this in a different color just to emphasize the importance here, okay? So what we've got here is that x equals -1 is the solution. Meaning it is the solution that makes this true. It makes f of x equal 0. But remember, we're factorizing cubic polynomials, so we also need to know what the factor is. If you remember from the video yesterday, this is teaching us, helping us find rather, the linear factor. So now imagine if I took this -1 over the equal sign. Do you agree that then it would become x plus 1? And that is essentially what we're doing. So there, that is our factor. So the linear factor we're looking for is x plus 1, but our solution is x equals -1. All right, so then step 2 involves us doing our actual synthetic division. That's why you'll see my little box here. So our synthetic, that C went weird. Okay, synthetic division. All right, now I'm going to follow the same way I did in the video. We're going to first put down the solution that we got here. In our case, it is -1. And then we're going to put all of the coefficients. So I'm just going to drop this down so that we can nicely see the coefficients. So that first coefficient we're looking at is 2. Notice that it's the coefficient for x cubed. The next one has to be the coefficient for x squared. So then it will be -2. The next one will be your coefficient for x, which in this case is -10. And then your last one will be your constant, which in this case is -6. All right, Now we're going to just start off, and the first thing we do is we just bring down this 2. Nice and easy, nothing too complicated. Now we start multiplying. So we're going to say minus 1 times 2 is going to give me minus 2. And then I'm going to add these two. Minus 2 plus minus 2 is going to be minus 4. Please be very careful that you are not tempted to say 0. Okay, then we're going to multiply again. Negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. Add these together. Negative 10 plus 4 should give me negative 6. Negative 1 times negative 6 will give me positive 6. And that gives us 0. Guys, it is super duper important that this answer is 0. If it is not, it is likely that something has gone wrong, or you have not used the correct factor, or you've made a mistake somewhere here. So for example, if you'd said minus 2 was 0, this would not give you a 0 answer, which would be an indication that something went wrong. So actually, it's kind of nice check that things aren't going awry. All right, so now that we have these, we know that we have the first steps of our factorization. So we know that the first factor, the linear factor, was x plus 1. And now we know, thanks to our synthetic division, that the next one is going to be 2x squared minus 4x minus 6. Ooh, wonky 6. Every once in a while, we just go a bit weird. And that's a human 6. All right. So now we have our linear factor and we have our quadratic factor. So that's really cool because we've been factorizing quadratics for years already. I mean, we started in grade 9, so that's pretty cool. And from here, you're going to get 2x plus 2. And in your other bracket, you're going to get x minus 3. Guys, if you are unsure of how to factorize, we need to chat about it so that we can be sure that you know how to factorize and that it's not too tough. Okay, but we might think we're done, but if I have a look here, I can see that there is still a common factor in that particular bracket. In fact, you could have taken out a common factor here if you wanted. So I'm going to take out that common factor of 2, and then I'm going to leave this one as x plus 1. And if I take out a common factor here, I'm left with x plus 1 from the second bracket, and x minus 3 is just going to stay exactly as she is. And then, because we like writing everything perfectly and beautifully in maths, we're just going to write this as x plus 1 squared and x minus 3. All right. So that's our first example. We're actually going to just move on to a second example. And the reason I want to do the second example is just so that you can see something that comes up that's pretty interesting. Okay. So just like before, our first step is to find those x's. The first step 1 is still to find the x so that fx is equal to 0. Nothing changed here, so let's carry on as is. Okay, let's try x equals 1. So when x is equal to 1, we get 1 cubed minus 13 times 1 minus 12. And that's going to give us 1 minus 13 minus 12, which is not going to give us 0, unfortunately. So let's try x equals minus 1. Okay, it's going to be minus 1 all cubed minus 13 times minus 1 minus 12. Alrighty, let's see how this one works out. So minus 1 all cubed is still minus 1. Minus 13 times negative 1 will give me plus 13. Minus 12, and would you look at that? It's 0. Okay, so once again, we're just going to put down here that our x equals minus 1 is our solution because it is the value of x that would make fx equal 0. But now our factor, so what we want next is our factor, because we do care about that linear factor. We're going to imagine we take this minus 1 over, and it's going to be x plus 1. All right, so now there we have our factor and our solution. So now we're going to head on to the second bit, which we know is synthetic division. And we're going to see if I can draw a straight line. And if I can't, just going to pretend. Oh, not too bad, I must say. Okay, so now I'm going to put down our solution over here. So that's -1 in this case. And now I'm going to put down the coefficients. But I need you to listen very carefully because this is where the trick in this specific example comes in. The first coefficient that I write down has to be the coefficient of x cubed. So the coefficient of x cubed in this case is just going to be 1. Not too bad. The next coefficient has to be x squared. But if you look at the question, there is no x squared. So our coefficient is 0. You have to remember to put this 0 in. If you do not put this 0 in, your solution will not work. Guys, I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to be sure that you have an x cubed coefficient, x squared coefficient, x coefficient, and then your constant. All right, so now we've got our x cubed, x squared. Do we have an x? Yes, we do. It's -13. And then our constant is -12. That's a weird 2, but it'll be fine. All right, now we can carry on with the synthetic division, which means that we can start bringing down, multiplying, etc. So let's start with step 1. Let's bring down this first number. Now we can times. -1 times 1 is -1. 0 minus 1, -1. -1 times -1, +1. -13 plus 1 will give you -12. And -1 times -12 will give you +12. And -12 plus 12 gives us that magical 0 that we needed. All right, and again, because we've got that 0, we know we're headed in the right direction. So now we can go straight up to factorizing. So we know that the first factor, or the linear factor, was x plus 1. And now we can see that our quadratic factor is going to be x squared, just 1x squared, minus 1x, minus 12. Now, you can use your quadratic formula to factorize this. If it makes you feel better, you'll get the solutions, but then you just need to remember to write them as factors. So this thing comes back in handy again. Okay, so because I'm okay with my factorizing, I'm just going to factorize it out in my head, and I hope that you are too, and if you're not, I'm here. Okay, and we're going to get x minus 4x plus 3. And that's it. That's factorizing it. So what was important about the second example was that you realize that while it had an x cubed, it didn't have an x squared, it did have an x, and it did have a constant. Please, they like to make you use ones like this where you have to remember to put this coefficient in. So please go through these 2 examples really slowly. Make sure that you're understanding where I'm getting things from, that you saw where I got the numbers from, where the coefficients came from. If you have any questions, just let me know. On Monday, we're going to start practicing some of these. So enjoy your weekend.